We've had dogs visit us on the programme, but we've never had one as a sofa guest before. Worzel is a lurcher. He's a rescue dog. You may well have read his blogs and his column in the Lowestoft Journal, but if you haven't, don't worry, because those blog posts have been turned into a book. The quite very actual adventures of Worzel Wooface. Worzel got to the final of the UK Blog Awards. He won a prize at the Noel Fitzpatrick's Dog Fest. Fortunately for us all, he's also brought his owner with him, so he can talk to, I don't have to do woofing language or whatever. We've also got Kath Pickles with us as well.
Hi, it's lovely to be here. I speak English.
and I have to say that we do really have a dog on the sofa, so Worzel is so chilled out. He's just relaxed and having a little snooze.
I'm afraid he's just taken advantage of the sofa just like he does with every sofa. He's gone there, he said, this is mine, and gone to sleep. It's very, very usual. I wasn't surprised.
So what's it like to see his book out in publication?
The whole thing has just been a
surreal
adventure. This all started back in January 2014 when I realised that I ended up adopting a dog, which I wasn't supposed to adopt at all. He was never supposed to be my dog. And I felt a little bit guilty. And I thought, what can I do? I thought, I know, I'll keep his previous owners up to date with what's going on.
Because, he bless him, because he's a rescue dog. He was badly treated by the person who bred him.
Yep.
Then someone took him on. But, as with a lot of rescue dogs, they can have sort of behavioural issues, and he wasn't the best with children, so he had to be, and I think that's when he came to you, is that right?
He came to me. I'd had some experience fostering dogs for several years. And both my children had grown up around dogs, but were also nearly adults, so they weren't running around being unpredictable with toys or falling over or dropping things and that kind of thing. And we were just in the right place at the right time to adopt him. But I did feel guilty because I'd seen pictures of him, when he'd been with his previous owners, and thought, oh, he's so beautiful. So when the lady phoned me and said, I've got problems, I need to rehome Worzel, I just said, he comes here. And those 3 words literally changed my life. I had no idea what was going to happen next.
And you started, I think, a Facebook page just to keep, so that because the family lives a long way away, so but you did that so that they can see him and see who is happy and that sort of thing.
That's exactly right. And then after a while, he started to develop his own voice, and over those first few months, we had my daughter was very unwell, and keeping the blog going was basically my way of going, my time, something different, something completely away from my daughter's illness, to just keep my own identity, and be creative and just have something else to do, and it just took on a life of its own. And then after it got a year had gone past, I thought, I wonder if I've got enough material here to create a book. I had about 50% really to make the book, and then just went back over the year and filled in a lot of the gaps, because there's some things that you just can't explain in a blog post because it's just immediate, it's there, and so you need to put some of the back stuff in. So I did all that, and self-published, and I came to see Sarah about this time last year.
This is Sarah Lilly, who is sitting in this chair.
Absolutely.
She's off on maternity leave now.
That's right.
She's got a lovely little baby girl, so because everyone always asks me about that as well. So
she said to me, well, what do you hope to achieve? Because I'd self-published it at that point. And she said to me, and I said, I'd really love to get a publishing contract. 4 months later, we got publishing contracts. And this book that's out currently is just a much better version of that original book. It's got photos in it and all sorts.
And it's published by Hubble and Hattie. They're sort of animal book publishers, they specialise.
They specialise in publishing books about animals, although this is I believe I'm right in saying that this is the first book that they've published that's actually been voiced by a dog. So they took a bit of a risk with it, if you like. And it wasn't until it had been out for a bit that people started saying to me, that's a really clever book. And I was like, it's just a funny book about a dog. And they said, it's really not, because unbeknown to me, all those years of fostering dogs and having dogs in my life meant that I was describing all the positive reward-based training that I'd done with him, all the rehabilitation that I'd done with him. So I was actually getting across to people what it's like actually having a rescue dog, and the time and the energy and the patience and the whole family involvement, actually, that is required when you take on a rescue dog. I didn't know I'd written that.
But you just came out and tell me a bit about him, because I think he fitted in, didn't he, really well? So Lurch, as you say, people fall in love with as well. So just describe him for us, and because you've just come back from a sailing trip, so he's obviously a sea dog apart from anything else.
Worzel came when he was 5 months old, and he really hasn't grown a great deal since then. So as you can imagine, at 5 months old, he was enormous. He's now 26 inches to the shoulder.
He's tall, but he's not big.
No,
is
he's
he?
not. He's not bulky in any way, but he's incredibly long. He can lie on my bed, and he can put his head on the pillow, and his tail is hanging off the end of the bed. He is obliging and kind and cautious, and very, very considerate, well-mannered. But he still has his issues. He still has things that I have to protect him from. But I can read him very well now, and 2 years on, he's grown and improved. And
because we took on a rescue dog as well, and our kids were sort of quite big, so we felt that they were all right around a dog that had snapped when it was with the little children. And I guess if they've been hit and so on, they're going to have reactions, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, we think that Worzel was possibly attacked with a cattle prod when he was a puppy, because he has an absolute terror of sticks or long objects touching his skin. He absolutely has hysterics, basically. So we try and avoid all those kinds of things. It's even difficult to get a flea treatment on him, just the tiny little drops, because you're supposed to put it on the back of the neck, and he doesn't like that. So we've had to adapt how we deal with even those things. He's much better now. He is safe with children, but in a managed environment. But actually, that's no different to any other dog.
No. And children should always be taught not to assume a dog is going to be nice to them, shouldn't they, as well? So our Satsuma, I shall never forget taking him along the road, and he suddenly started to look pretty frightened. He hadn't been socialised very well. And there was someone coming with an umbrella towards us. So we'd never seen an umbrella. So those are the sorts of things you have to think about, isn't it?
We had a terrible problem with someone wearing flip-flops. Someone Worzel knew incredibly well came into my home, and Worzel was immediately terrified, barking, aggressive, if you like, with the barking and the running backwards and forwards and that kind of thing. And eventually we worked out it was because this lady was wearing flip-flops, and someone in his past, when he was young, had obviously been very unpleasant to him, wearing flip-flops.
Well, you obviously recognise the sound of a flip-flop, yeah.
It's a very distinctive sound.
It's because they don't forget, do they? No. I think dogs are clever, aren't they? And they remember.
They are. And if something negative happens before a dog is, say, 12 to 14 weeks old, then that becomes actually imprinted in them, and it's quite difficult to manage that behaviour out. It's the same as if anything dreadful happens to a very, very young child. You can't actually work it out, because it's disappeared so far into their personality that getting it out can be quite hard work. But compared to 2 years ago, personality-wise, he's a different dog. There are still some things that upset him, but, most things great.
He's certainly pretty happy now.
Yes.
So he's even ignoring the scones at the moment, which is as well, because then we can eat them a little bit later on. So tell me about it, because you went to a UK blog awards, wasn't it?
That was another step along the journey of, can I do this? Is this worth doing? I entered the blog into the UK Blog Awards last year, and we made the final. And again, some of those blogs are very slick and very professionally run. I was up against, companies as well as individuals and people who've been doing it for years and years. And I've been running this blog at that point by about 10 months. Some people had 10 years experience behind them. And so to get to the final was just fantastic. We didn't win. I didn't expect to win, because the categories there wasn't a category
for dogs.
Dogs What Blog. No, but so we were in sort of like the lifestyle category. But just to make the final was just another thing that just moved us on and made me think, I can do this.
Oh, and what about the Noel Fitzpatrick's Dog Fest? What's that?
Oh, well, I've been incredibly lucky with a couple of people who have either started following Worzel's blog or who have become interested in what we do. And a lady called Beverly Cuddy, who runs the magazine Dogs Today.
Yeah, I think I've talked to her in the past.
And Dogs Monthly. Became a bit of a Worzel fan, and she said to me, well, why don't you come up to Dog Fest, which is the big dog show that Noel Fitzpatrick runs in aid of the Humanimal Trust. Why don't you come and help out with some judging? It would be great if you did, and you can be on the Dogs Today stand. Unbeknown to me, Worzel was given an award for basically being the dog booker, winning the dog booker prize, and also being a champion and an ambassador for other rescue dogs, which was just amazing. And so I'm stood on this stage in front of, it felt like a bit like being on a rock, like a stadium stage, with Worzel, who basically stood there and just yawned his way through the whole thing. I think he found it terribly unimpressive.
Guest with us at the moment, Worzel, the rescue dog, on the sofa. He's just had a little bit of cheese scone, not too much, because I'm sure it's not too good for him. His human owner, Catherine Pickles, is our guest with us today. And we're talking about how his blog was turned into a book. There's book 2 on the way. You won a blog, well, you went to the finals of a blog award as well. So I said that he'd come to a great home, so he'd found a great home, but he, unbeknown to you, suddenly became a real lifesaver. So you'd done the Facebook page, and then your daughter became really poorly, didn't she?
She became really unwell. Several years before Sarah became very unwell, she was victim of a horrendously violent crime. And the impact of that only really started to come out when she was a teenager. And I went from having a reasonably good job. I was working for Suffolk County Council. I was made redundant, as a lot of people were in 2011. I was just beginning to start thinking about, getting another job and moving on to the next stage of my career, and my daughter became incredibly unwell. And if you are a carer, and a family carer, it's very easy to lose your own identity and to become the carer, just the carer, and finding time for yourself and finding priorities and projects and things that actually allow you to have some kind of career at the same time as your caring responsibilities is difficult. And my anxiety levels were going up and up and up, and I was literally worried out of my mind about my daughter. But having Worzel in the house and having something else that I needed to do, because I needed to work with him to improve his behaviour and move towards rehabilitation with him. Writing again, which is something that I'd always loved when I was much younger. And also interacting with people through the blog was just such a relief and a great way for me to combine being a carer and having a life of my own. Can
you remember starting the blog? Was it, because I know you did lots of stuff late in the night and sort of at odd hours, didn't you?
I mean, when I started the blog, which was in February. It was about 3 weeks, between 10 days and 3 weeks. I forget now how long it was after I first got Worzel. It was all very much just a little updates, but as things became more serious with my daughter, and I was having to stay up till sort of 2-3 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't go to sleep until she was asleep and things like that. I became more and more involved, and it was almost like I was being, by day she's a carer, by night she's a vlogger, and it was very much like that I was literally putting my caring responsibilities to one side and then taking on this new mantle of being my dog, which sounds very strange and very
odd.
It's
a release, isn't it, in a way? And you say in some of your notes to me that it allowed you, I mean, you didn't want your dog to be depressed and upset and worried, so talking as Worzel made you see things and look at things in a different way.
I think that's really true. I think it's very easy to become bogged down and very narrow-minded about what's going on in your life at a particular time, but actually finding a different perspective. I've often said Worzel had to have his own voice because he couldn't have mine, because mine was just so anxious and so worried the whole time. It literally took me out of that place. And at first it was like putting on a different outfit and going on stage and performing in a very strange way. But in my head, and of course the psychological process of doing that just gives you a lift. And everything became much easier once I got into the flow of that, because I was able to have something for myself. And of course then my self-esteem started to go up, my self-confidence, my self-belief. Being a carer is an incredibly lonely experience very often. You can become incredibly isolated. and a lot of your own ambitions and your own hopes and dreams have to be put on one side.
And that's at the same time as being really worried as well, isn't
absolutely.
it? So,
and also,
you almost don't even have time to think about yourself, do you? It's
no,
just,
and the Worzel thing all came about very accidentally and crept up on us.
When did the Lowestoft Journal say we want to put a column? Because that must have been amazing as well.
Oh, that was lovely. It was about October. I can't remember when it was. They ran a little article about the book launch, and Worzel wrote a letter into the head hitter, as he calls poor old Andrew Papworth is the head hitter, saying thank you for writing an article about me. And then Worzel and Andrew had a bit of a conversation, and ultimately Worzel said, do you want me to write a column for you? And Andrew said yes. And it wasn't until about 6 months later that I found a social media post that Andrew had written. He said, I've just signed a dog for my newspaper. This is the highlight of my career. And we've been doing it ever since. And the feedback that we get is fantastic. On social media, you get feedback immediately. With the newspaper, you don't get that immediate feedback, inevitably, because it's a newspaper column. But people come up to us in Southwold particularly, and in Lowestoft, and they say, love the column, it's the reason we buy the Lowestoft Journal. So of course I tell Andrew that immediately. But that's lovely, because it's a completely different audience. A lot of people read newspapers who don't necessarily do social media. So it's just lovely when people come up and say things like that.
You're going to read me a little bit, because I know that when you write now, and you write as Worzel, you do have his voice in your head, don't you?
Absolutely. I couldn't write this with a straight face. I mean, you just couldn't do it.
And you're going to try and do the voice that's in your head, because I don't know how easy that necessarily is it?
I'm getting all right at it now. Mum wented out for an Indian meal tonight, so I did have a chew on her Kindle again. I has lost count of how many I have eaten now. I think Mum might finally have learned that keeping an electronic device in a yummy leather case is not a great idea, especially if you leave your bedroom door open, and did not take me for a walk because it was chilly.
So how many Kindles have you lost?
3. Yeah, but I have a habit of leaving, I read in bed, like a lot of people do, and of course you just leave the Kindle lying on the bed, and then the dog finds it, and of course it's there, it's available.
So tell me about book 2.
Well,
it's actually, is it on the way then?
It is.
Because you've got it in your hand there.
I have, but I have to say that this is probably one of only about 3 or 4 copies in print at the moment. This is just the preview copy, which arrived for me whilst I was away. This is the second year of Worzel's life. People describe it as the terrible twos, or the teenage years with dogs. Basically, you do a lot of work during the first year, and they've got the training and they've got the obedience, and they're becoming extremely manageable, just like children. And then they get to teenagers, and everything that you think that they've learned, everything that you think that you can rely on about the way that they're going to behave and everything that they're going to do goes out the window. And this is the book of Worzel's teenage years. And there were some experiences, I can tell you, because he had suddenly went from having a reasonable recall. I mean, he's a sight hound, so sight hounds,
If he sees it, he wants to go
yeah,
after
absolutely.
it.
But we did actually get to a point where, he would come back within, 20 seconds or so, to me having to fish him out of somebody's pond, that kind of recall. And a lot of things like that happened. And so this is a story of that I think a great many dog owners will appreciate, in that, you do actually end up wondering if everything that you did was a complete pointless waste of time.
It's nice to know, isn't it, when someone else's dog isn't too obedient, if yours is not always behaving as well. It's always nice to hear of others.
I think what the hope that what people will get out of it is the fact that, yes, this actually happens to everyone. We've always tried to be incredibly honest about things when we've made mistakes. We've always tried to say, I've done the wrong thing. I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this. But I think you get these very, very positive but quite cute stories about dogs sometimes. This isn't cute. Worzel is muddy, smelly, he wheezes, he poos. He sometimes doesn't do all those things in the places or at the times that you want them to achieve it. It's honest. And I think that is it's to a certain extent the appeal.
So anyone who's got a dog is going to learn from it. Anyone who's got a dog is going to relate to it, aren't they? And hopefully people that don't have... Yeah, and cats are mentioned as well. But you're also, at least with your first book, you were donating some of the royalties to the charity. And I've never heard of the charity, Hounds First Sight Hound Rescue. So tell me about that.
All the books that I write I'll make a donation to Hounds First. Hounds First were the organisation who originally rescued Worzel. And the reason I owe them a huge debt is because the person who originally adopted Worzel, who phoned me up and said, I need to find a new home for Worzel, was the founder of the rescue herself. Her name's Rachel, and it was a very brave decision that she made to rehome Worzel, because founders of rescue charities generally don't rehome their own dogs. So she did a very brave thing in acknowledging that needed to happen. And I owe them, because I have got the most fantastic dog in the world, and he is a dream and I love him to bits. So we will always want to make a donation towards that charity.
Do they look just after, are they particularly hounds, like he's a lurcher, or any dogs, or?
It's a charity predominantly, it's a national charity with foster dogs in foster all over the country. And it's for sight hounds and lurchers, so lurchers, greyhounds, whippets, salukis, deerhound, wolfhound, and all the different crosses in between. And because there are a lot of these dogs they're overbred. They're often bred for inappropriate actions such as hunting, either usually illegal hunting, or for racing, and there's a huge surplus. And these dogs are always in need of homes. So yes, it's a very, very important charity, and one I will continue to support.
And one that's changed your life and his life as well.
Absolutely.
If people want to meet you in person and buy your book, Waterstones in Ipswich on Saturday?
I will be, yes, at 11 o'clock, and Worzel will be there as well. I can pretty much guarantee he'll be doing just about exactly what he's doing now, which is falling asleep.
Having a nice laze.
Yes, just basically having a nice snooze. But we'll be there, and we'll be signing books, and Worzel has got his portographs with him, so we'll be bringing those. I'm sorry, this all sounds completely mad, but I just love it. We've got these little stickers with his footprint on them.
Oh, he's going to have to I've got a copy of a book here. We're going to have to get him to do that for me as well before you leave as well. Thank you ever such a lot for coming in. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
We'll talk to you when book 3 is out as well.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Thank you, Worzel. He hasn't made a word, look. He hasn't done a word.
I know. Wait,
he doesn't even bark a yawn to Worzel, do you want to say anything?
I'm afraid not. Your sofa is too comfortable.
He might be going,
yes.
I think, if anything else. Thank you.